My name is Katie Edge. It's September 25th, 1998, and we're here today as part of the Legal History Project of the Tennessee Bar Foundation, interviewing the Honorable Shirley Underwood, who has been a juvenile court judge in Johnson City, Tennessee for 37 years. We are pleased to be here at the University of Tennessee's College of Law in the Dean's Conference Room. Judge Underwood was born on May 3, 1921 in Bristol, Tennessee, to Bessie Kegley Baumgartner and John Fred Dixon Baumgartner, a Bristol lawyer. We appreciate the judge spending time with us today.
Thank you, Katie. It's a real delight and an honor to be here today.
Judge, let's begin by talking a little bit about your family. Your father was a lawyer, was he not?
That's right.
Tell me about his practice.
His practice consisted mainly of civil practice. He, however, did have some criminal practice. And he was office trained, I guess you'd say, with a local judge there in Bristol back in the late, or at least at the beginning, about 1916 and so forth. Not like me, and I'm a graduate of the University of Tennessee College of Law in August of 1948. He always, I think, aspired to see that some member of a family of six did attend law school.
I see. So he read the law.
He read the law.
That's
right. That's right. And of course, I followed in his footsteps from that standpoint.
So you would say that he was the primary influence in your life to become a lawyer?
Probably so. He was a son of a Baptist minister and a first cousin to Thomas Dixon, who wrote the Klansman at the May Birth of a Nation from. That's where he gets the Dixon in his name. But he had great foresight, Katie, this tremendous foresight. And this, of course, my mother was a very inspirational individual, but it was he who did most of the encouragement, you know, by being or going into the field of law.
I believe you practiced with him when you first came out of law school.
I certainly did. Yeah. From admitted to practice on April the 12th, 48, and he insisted I go ahead and get my degree in August, and I came in August of 48, immediately upon graduation.
Do you have brothers and sisters?
Had one brother. I had four sisters. So that made a family of six, pretty coming up in depression, so to speak. Quite a large family.
Tell us a little bit about your brothers and sisters and what they have done in their lives.
Well, all of us, to a degree, have followed pretty much along lines. I had one sister that I'm quite proud of, that served as a federal court clerk in Knoxville, Tennessee, Julia Cross. That's been back some years ago, and she's now retired, living in Nashville. She and I were just about 2 years apart, and as two young girls, we would very often go to his office with him at various times, and he would talk to us about law and show us things, law books and so forth. But she really, in so many ways, corresponded more to the actual field. And I think at one time, there was only about 6 women federal court clerks in the nation, and she was one. Then I had another sister who worked for many years in the circuit court clerk's office in Johnson City. And she, of course, had taught school. And the three of us attended University of Tennessee and Graduate University, and 2 sisters did not attend college, but there was a period of time during Depression when my father had not only my brother, who unfortunately didn't go into practice law, even though he was very, very talented in that way. He went in the military as a private and came out a colonel in the Air Force and was in administrative duties. But I guess being in the military kept him from going on, or he could have, but he's married and had a family. But we all had some touch of the law in our lives.
But you were the only one of the brothers and sisters who actually went to law school. Is that correct?
That's right. Now, my brother was a U.S. Commissioner at one time. That was after he was married and in the height of Depression. I might also add, for those, and anything you might use later on this tape for, that it appeared that those of us that came up with depression, and I'm sure you and many others have quite a talent for what did happen, but the four of us were more or less sort of stair steps in college. And I imagine that, excuse me, probably was one of the reasons he was married and been overseas a great deal of his time. And then, of course, with a family that when he did return, he just was not going to go to law school, even though he'd had some interest in it. But depression made a big difference in all of our lives,
It certainly
that's for sure.
You were educated in public schools, I believe, in Bristol as a young girl. And then you went on to East Tennessee State University for a while.
That's right.
All right. How long were you there?
Well, this is again another sort of a person that I had a sister, the one I spoke of that worked in the clerk's office, was at the University of North Carolina for a while, and then she transferred from there. She finished in Virginia Intermont in Bristol, however, prior to going to UNC, and then she transferred to UT, so she was at UT, and I decided, or I felt like it'd be less burden on my father, to go to East Tennessee State. And I was there 2 years from 39 through 41, and then I transferred to the University at Knoxville. When she was out of school, I transferred then to Knoxville.
And so you graduated, got your undergraduate degree from UT Knoxville.
Undergraduate here in 1943.
And I believe you didn't go right into law school after that, but had a career as a teacher for a while, did you not?
I tried real hard.
What did you teach?
Taught in junior high the first year at a little country school outside of Bristol, Holston Valley. Taught a group of about 7th and 8th graders in math and health.
That's what sent me to law school too, being a junior high school teacher. I know what you mean.
Good. And then I taught seniors in algebra. Very interesting. I started at $100 a month in the fall of 43. And of course, $100 today is a drop in the bucket, as you know. But was there and stayed. They had, I'm pretty tough, you know, tough stuff. But they had run off 2 teachers, and I at that time sort of working on my master's on weekends here in Knoxville. But I stayed with it until the June of 44. And then I decided, prior to finishing college, I might say, that I did take, in between my junior and senior year, I did take summer school in UT Law School. At that time, you could go and take your senior year in college as the first year of law school. You could take it as your senior year in college. And so I had one summer session in law school then. But back to teaching, very interesting. And then the next year, I moved to Kingsport, Tennessee, and taught there in the 7th grade. And while I was going to that school, or teaching at that particular school, they offered a course in for teachers to learn how to fly. Now, you have to think back in 44 and 45, 46, was still a lot of unrest in the world. And so I applied and did get a scholarship. And while I was in Kingsport that 1 year, that salary bumped up to $125 a month, believe it or not. But anyway, I did go on weekends to East Tennessee State and studied on Friday and Saturdays, and then flew during the week.
All right, so you did you get your pilot's license?
No, that was back in the days when you listened to your parents.
I see.
And of course, I had great, I had even a great interest in aviation because my mother was related to Amelia Earhart, who, of course, was quite a lady in her field of flying. And yet my mother was very strong against my flying or soloing. So I do have my logbook, and I did log a lot of hours, but I didn't actually fly. I took cross country from Tri-Cities to Knoxville to Middlesboro, Kentucky. And I did have that experience, which was very beneficial later on because after I get into then my next bit of my life, that I moved to Atlanta for 1 year and worked at Delta Airlines.
And what'd you do with Delta?
Well, there were real gophers then. You did a little bit of everything. You did reservation principally, and sometimes you worked at the field ticket office. And from that, you just city ticket office, field ticket office. You had to be a jack of all trades.
I see.
Very fascinating, very interesting. And today, I've just said to the Delta people not too long ago, I thought they ought to pick up some of us that were there 50-some years ago and do something which you're doing here today as far as law is concerned.
It'd be very interesting history, wouldn't it?
Very interesting.
Let's go back and talk a little bit about your beginning years in law school, Judge Underwood. I know that you were in law school at the University of Tennessee at a time when there weren't many women.
That's right.
How many women were in your class?
We had actually 4 that started out, and of the 4, 2 of us did graduate.
And do you remember the name of the other woman who graduated with you?
Was Nell Williams from Etowah, Tennessee. The other 2 was Betty Jane West from Knoxville, and I just can't right now recall. I know it may come to me, but right at this point I can't, but 2 of us did graduate.
Tell us about your experiences as a young woman in law school when there were so few of you. What was that like?
Well, to be quite honest with you, it was very interesting, very challenging, because several, having been out a couple of years, a lot of the fellows who had been in the military that I had known on the campus were back in school. So really, I like to think and still say that it was like being in a family, because we went to school from August of 46 right through to August 48. We went summer and winter all the way through. And I always felt like that I respected the men and they respected me. And I can truthfully say I don't think I was ever discriminated against, and I certainly tried not to discriminate against them.
Tell me about your law school professors. Is there anyone who was memorable?
Oh yes, definitely. I think anyone that ever had the real opportunity to have been in one of Judge Robert M. Jones's classes would say, in my opinion, probably the most impressionable teacher, one of the few that I've ever had. I had some in grade school that were very impressionable. But Judge Jones married late in life. He married a lady from Washington County, a family that I happen to know. Gentlemen that really, this was a great inspiration to all, and I think I remember more of the things that he taught us.
And what did he teach?
He taught Chancery.
Chancery.
He'd been a chancellor down at Rockwood, Tennessee, and very knowledgeable. And even long after I finished law school, he and his wife would come and visit us, and I'm a very proud owner now of the gavel he had when he was chancellor down in Rockwood.
Do you use that on the bench?
I have used, but well, I'll just be quite honest with you, I wouldn't want anyone to walk off with it, so I have others that people have been so generously given to me.
If you had, obviously now, statistics tell us that about 50% of most law school classes are women. If you had advice for young women starting to law school now, what would it be?
Always wear the same size hat, regardless of whether you're young or old. Never get the big head. Try to be yourself. I've always maintained that, and of course a lot of this I'm sure is due to the guidance of my father. As far as men are concerned, he said, you know, try to listen to them and do your best to listen without interruption. And if they have an idea, listen. And then if you don't agree with them, just try to present yourself so maybe someday or some way you can pull them back into your thoughts in the way you're thinking. And I feel like that don't, again, it's good to have missions and goals, and that's really what life's all about. But I also feel like that we've got to realize that now that women are almost in the majority, not only in law, but in many other phases of life, that to present yourself well, try to be understanding and compassionate. In society, that applies to all of us, whether it's in law or anything else.
Your very good friend, Judge Leon Jordan, spoke with me about you and your career, and one of the things he said about you was that you were an extremely compassionate person on the bench and that you always gave children the benefit of the doubt. I thought that was a high compliment.
I cherish that, especially since it came from Judge Leon Jordan.
He also told me some interesting stories about you as a lawyer, one of the few women lawyers in Washington County, and said that you had a reputation up there for going to the Bar Association meetings and pretty much holding your own. Can you tell us about that?
Well, I guess you would say I tried to do it very diplomatically. My husband was a medical doctor and a local fellow who was a tremendous individual. I guess because of his compassion for people, much as my father had too, that I know that's one of the things I was so attracted to. I guess you always marry men that remind you of your father, at least that was when I grew up. But anyhow, I just tried to work with them and tried to be a part of them. That's the only way I know to put it.
Judge Jordan alluded to the fact that some of the behavior of the local barristers in Washington County improved enormously with your entrance into their fold, their conduct and their language, and he thought that was a good thing.
Well, I try not to be obstinate to things, but we had a couple of instances where I had to very politely say to some of them, I think it's now time to stop drinking, or as I did in one instance, I had to put a napkin in a prominent attorney's mouth to shut him up. You know, he was pretty well lit, so to speak, and maybe that wasn't very ladylike, but I thought that came a point in time and a place for things too, and he was a little out of order.
One of the things that I'd like for you to talk about is your years that you practiced with your father. Do you remember your first case?
Yes, I can remember of all that I might have had, because when I came back, and my father practiced at that time in '48, he'd been a member of bar, as I said, back in the early part of that, at least 35 or 40 more years. And when I came in, he said, listen, you know, now this is your firm, you take over, I'll help at any time, be available, because I still lived at home. I didn't move out and get an apartment like young people today seemingly move out. And to me, I always characterized myself as being, my dad's mother was a first, and her folks had come from Scotland, and that I have too much Scotch in me. Now I'm talking about Scotch blood to really get out on my own and spend that money. I stayed at home.
Well, let me ask you a question about that, Judge. I omitted one little piece of your educational background that I thought was interesting, and you apparently attended the University of Edinburgh in Scotland for a while. Tell us about that.
In 1987, the National Council of Juvenile and Family Court Judges that's stationed in Reno, Nevada, had an opportunity to have a working agreement with the University of Edinburgh Law School, and I went over for about a 2 weeks trip. I had very interesting that we were over there because at that time I got two of my sisters went with me, And I'll interject one of your questions I know that you sent in advance about the politics. I still am and then was very much interested in Governor Alexander, who appointed me to several different state commissions. And I would fly out of Tri-Cities to Nashville to various meetings and build up enough, I guess they call it perk time, that I managed to take two of my sisters, both of whom I spoke, had been in the field law, and they went with me to Edinburgh for the approximately 2 weeks that we were there. But anyway, very fascinating. We visited the courts. We visited in the general area of Edinburgh. I'd been on, back in '82, right after my husband died, I'd been on a foreign tour with, even went into Russia, foreign tour with a group of juvenile justice people. But I really think that the time that we spent at the University of Edinburgh Law School was most profitable. We learned a lot about the court system in England and Scotland. We, of course, just to get out and visit with those people. The Scotch people are fantastic. And of course, when they found out that our grandmother had been a Ferguson, and it was time that Fergie was quite popular, we were very, very royally entertained, believe me. But here again, I think we have to be modest at any time, and that's what I tried to be. The two sisters lapped it up. But anyhow, be that as it may, it was an interesting experience.
I interrupted you. I apologize
That's all right.
for talking about your
Father's practice.
Your father's practice, and you know, I'm very interested in the first cases
First
that you worked
case,
on.
all right.
Yeah.
Now I'll get back. I have a bad, well, it's not a bad habit, but a habit of sometimes digressing too far astream. The first case that I vividly remember, I had been introduced to the bar in Bristol, Tennessee, and I did bring a clipping. You're probably not interested in a newspaper article about being introduced as Bristol's first Portia Trent. So anyway, Chancellor Joe Worley, very outstanding jurist in our area, was chancellor at the time, and I must say, and I think those that have had any contact know that he was a prince, really what you say, a prince of a person as much as he was a judge. Was so gracious when he gave a little talk after I was introduced. But I had a divorce case before him, and so I was representing a young man that was in the military. And he was suing his wife for divorce, claiming she'd been unfaithful and so forth. And so Judge Worley, being the scholar he really was in law, he asked the young man if he'd been true to his marriage vows and so forth. Well, he asked the judge, well, what do you mean? And he said, well, what I want to know, you're charging her with running around on you, as we say in East Tennessee, and stepping out on you. Have you been true and faithful and not haven't gone out? And he looked up at Judge Worley, and I can see Judge up there now. He wore glasses, and he said to the judge, well, Your Honor, he said, I figured if she could run around on me, I could run around on her. To which Judge Worley just cracked his gavel and says, case dismissed. And that made a real impression on me, because no lawyer ever likes to lose a case, and certainly this being a young woman attorney. But he was one of the best friends I ever had, even in late years. He's now deceased.
In those days, lawyers didn't make quite the livings that they make these days, some of them. Do you remember what you earned in a month as a young lawyer?
No, I can't tell you that. I do know that when I first started out, and my father said, you know, look, this is here. He was, what you might say, very much interested in farms. He had a lot of land, and he loved that. And he said, now I'm going to go out and do my farm, and you can take over. So really, as far as keeping a running account, that I can't tell you right off. But I had a good income, profited by the fact that he had a real good practice, and most of my practice is in the civil area. And not today, if I were practicing, I don't care for divorces. I think Judge Worley took care of that. But anyway, I'm mainly very much interested in workman's compensation cases. I guess the most outstanding case I had, coming back in August, and in December, I was practicing before, had my case of Annie Grabeel versus Coal Operator Casualty Company of Pennsylvania.
And now, what year was this?
This is 1948.
All
I
right.
finished law school in August, and it was a very interesting case. I won it at the local level, and the insurance company appealed. And of course, in those days, they went directly to the Supreme Court, the workman's comp. And I remember it because the fellow that came to me had one time been a tenant on my father's farm, and he said he'd been to a half dozen or more lawyers, and they all turned it down and said that the man had died about a year and a half after he had been injured in a rock quarry. And I did know the citation, but I don't recall it right at the moment. But it's reported in our cases. But anyhow, I said, well, you know, I'll give it a chance. And so anyway, I took the matter, and I like to think at that time Judge Hamilton Burnett was Chief Justice at Knoxville. I believe it was about December, early December, when I argued the case before the Supreme Court here in Knoxville. And they did ask me a number of questions, but I guess the main thing I recall about it more than any presentation I made was the fact that I tried to go to court and look like a lady, and my mother had made sure that I went dressed appropriately. She didn't like the blouse I got to wear with my suit, and so she went down and got me one. It was a pretty expensive suit, but that had little ruffles down the front and around the collar and the sleeves. She wanted me to look very feminine. And I've always said that I will never forget my first appearance in court. And I associated with then the city judge of Johnson City because my father, who it was to be heard, had just had a heart attack, was in a hospital. And so he did give me a lot of parting words that, you know, quitter never wins, winner never quits. And you go down there and just forget that you're a woman and state the case. And I was prepared for it and won it. I won it. And in that case, there was 3 young children that survived, and the company would not pay off the full amount. But we got death benefits. And at that time, the 3 children, I think all were under the age of about 12 or so. I did manage to get them into grandfather's home at Banner Elk, North Carolina. And I have since seen, these, at least one of these children, the Lingerfelds. But I thought that was interesting. They spread the amount out over a period of time rather than lump sum payment.
You practiced in your father's firm that he
Yes.
began from 1948 to 1956. Is that
That's
right?
right.
And then you married Dr. Charles Underwood.
That's right.
Tell us about your husband.
Well, words are inadequate to describe him. He was a most unusual, fantastic, just unbelievably, you know, I thought, well, I'll probably go through life and never marry. That wasn't, of course, any young girl's wish. But my sister had married a young doctor in Johnson City, and we met one night at a dinner there. And didn't know him too many years, but we had almost 25 years, I think, of about as good a marriage. Now, we had our differences, But I think it's the fact that he had his profession and I had mine, that we got along so well. I used to say to him, you know, we meet in the carport, you know, and he's coming in from work and I'm going out to give a talk or something. But there's no question in my mind, a lot of elements entered into it. In '55, my father died, buried on Easter Sunday. His mother died, was buried in May of '55 on Mother's Day. And then in November, on Armistice Day of '55, my mother died. And so we had a lot of that, and a lot of, you might say, adversity. Well, it's not adversities, I guess, but a lot of things of that kind. And so we were married then in '56 after those things happened. But he was an unusual person. You go into Johnson City today, I could go to the grocery store and people walk up and say, you know, Dr. Underwood was my doctor, and oh, how much I miss him. The new circuit judge up there's mother came up to me in the grocery store recently, Jean Stanley, another graduate at UT Law School, and she said, I just want you to know that Dr. Underwood took care of our whole family.
Now,
And
Judge Stanley, I believe.
Judge Stanley,
right.
you're right,
That's
Judge
right.
Jean Stanley.
That's right.
That's right. But I just thought that was so interesting, and then she related that her brother was a contractor there in town and been out there many times, but I never knew the family relationship.
Well, Judge Jordan told me that he had spent many happy times in your home and talked about what a gracious host your husband was.
Gosh, he was. He was just fantastic. I can't, as again point out, words are inadequate to ever fully explain, as I so often tell people today, whether this is of interest or not, that I hit the jackpot once, but I don't think I'll ever do it again. Although, you know, you never know. It could happen, but
you never know.
I'd say it's sort of doubtful because he was just an unusual individual, and we had a very good life. We differed on a lot of things. He was a Democrat and I was a Republican, and he said after I got appointed, incidentally, if you get around to it, appointed by the greatest governor that Tennessee has ever had.
Well, that's what I was about to come to, is when you were appointed to the bench.
I was appointed, was told by the local publisher of the newspaper that the only reason I got the job, that I was a woman who had attended law school and was practicing attorney. Many others wanted it. But the late Governor Buford Ellington appointed me in October of 1961.
Now, that was for an unexpired term, wasn't it?
Unexpired
Whose
term of my
was
predecessor, Elizabeth Culpepper. And he, I think that Judge Ellington was probably the smartest governor we ever had in the state when he could recognize talent in the opposition. But anyway, with that aside, I'll just say that it was my husband's comment after some friends gave a big party after my appointment and swearing in. He said that he had never made a decision since, and that I made all the decisions. So I've always thought that was really clever. But he was a wonderful individual. And I again point out, his memory 17 years later is still there. When people say over and over again, I can't go to the grocery store without someone coming up. And he had a general practice. He wanted to doctor everybody from babies to grandmas, and that's what he did.
You were appointed to the bench, the juvenile court bench,
That's
in
right.
1961 by that Democrat,
That's right.
Governor Ellington.
That great governor.
That great governor. And you had to run then in
That's right.
August of 62, is that right?
That's right.
And who did you defeat in that election?
Well, I wish you hadn't asked me. I defeated by about 85 votes Judge Stuart Cannon, who just retired as General Sessions Judge in Johnson City. I had just been in town this couple of years, and Stuart and I are still good friends. We go to the same church, Central Baptist Church in Johnson City. He's a very fine person. His wife's in my Sunday school class. We're very close. But at
That was quite an accomplishment in those days, though, wasn't it?
well,
for you?
yes, I guess
Yeah,
it was.
absolutely.
Very interesting. He and I both, though have through the years remained good friends. Sort of like the Tennessee-Florida game last week, you know. Steve Spurrier, you know, is from Johnson City. That was one last Saturday night, you know, here in Knoxville. But Stuart made an excellent jurist.
Have you have been elected every 8 years since 1962 to that bench. Is that
That's right.
correct? From that first election, when you had opposition, have you had any other opposition?
I had opposition the third time, and then I had it again in '94. Mm-hmm. And well, I won't go in great detail about, there's a fellow that is a adjoining landowner that really doesn't relish my thoughts about a lot of things, particularly he's tried to open the alley between the house he owns and I do. And so he's managed to get opposition out the last 2 times. And I have won each time. The last time in '94, about 63% of the vote. Mm-hmm. Wasn't easy. It was by a young person, and I just had just gotten my salary increased in May beforehand for the election, and everybody says that will never work, you know. But I like to think that that I've done a good job, or tried to do a good job.
Let's talk a little bit about what you have seen happening in the juvenile justice system throughout the years. Talk a little bit with us about what changes you have seen in the system itself.
Probably the greatest change has been in the breakdown of the family home. I'm a great believer that, you know, if you train up a child in the way they'll go when they're old, they'll not depart from it. The dysfunctional families of today, they disturb me. And certainly with, when I came in '61 and even up into the early '60s, we had a lot of family continuity, where the family were pretty well together. And then there was seemingly a breakdown. You had people knew where their children were. They did things with them. And then for some reason or other, and I don't know what happened, of course I have my theories about what happened, a lot of it, of course, in facts and stats and so forth. But I think so many young people of today are at home, and maybe the parents are somewhere else. I think there's been a breakdown in a lot of single mothers. No father in the home, never has been. So I think this breakdown in the home has been a real difference in the families I saw 37 years ago compared to today. 37 years ago, you'd find a child, most of the children came from low income or middle income families. I'm getting children now in the court who are coming from families who income probably is in the $300,000 and $400,000 or maybe $1 million range. They're doing everything from counterfeiting $20 and $10 bills or money, plus doing many other things. I'm getting, within the last couple of weeks, more pressure from some of these so-called affluent society with parents who call you even at home, some of them with high positions in state government and elsewhere, trying to get you to change your opinion as you render, particularly in driver's license. So I think this breakdown, continuity of the home, has been probably the most disturbing feature. Then at the same time, we have gotten to the point where we have, instead of toughening the laws, we've made them weaker and weaker. Now I believe in probation, definitely probation. But I think there was time 37 years ago that our juveniles that were in an institution, they kept them long enough to teach them a trade. I have in my office in Johnson City 2 real nice benches that were made when we had the youth center at Joelton. I think that was under Governor Ellington too, that we had that. They taught them a trade. But now they tried to go a lot of other ways. We had a girls' school at Tullahoma that taught the girls how to do things, to be a dietitian or a beautician. I have some that now, even a year or so ago, a lady with a beautician here in Knoxville called me and thanked me for having sent her to Tullahoma many, many years ago.
What do you think that lawyers and judges can do today to help make the system better? There are various commissions, study commissions, things like that going on. Talk a little bit about what the organized bench and bar are doing to try to improve the juvenile justice system.
Well, I guess I can speak only as to our local bar and to the state meetings that we have. And recently we had one here in Nashville. We try to look at the laws and try to give our opinions. The juvenile court judges, as well as the sessions judges, you know, in many areas, they have general session has jurisdiction over the juveniles. I think that after 30-some years, that many of them are moving back to the area of maybe a little more of, still have compassion, understanding, and probation, but tightening the laws where really, if you make a commitment of a child, that they don't go to an institution. Just yesterday, I had a case, day before yesterday, a case where a boy had been away to a state institution and stayed there, I think, 2.5 months. Then they sent him back to what they call a step down. And maybe I'm digressing too much on what happens, but to a step down at a local boys group home from which the boy had run a number of times. Well, this makes it tough because these kids today are pretty sharp and they know what you can or what the system can or cannot do. So I think that is sort of a slap in the face to any judge. And just as I know that we're going to have to build more and more juvenile institutions, our population is increasing and it's not being foresighted when you just think that it's all going away. They found that out in England and Scotland. It doesn't go away. Now, I'm not in favor of a lot of techniques in the law that they do have in England of saying a child, you know, that you have to treat them like a child at all times. But we're going to have to toughen the laws or lower the age limit. And I advocate that. I never thought I ever would. 20 years ago, no one could ever make me believe that I'd say I'd want to lower the age limit to 16. But we've got to get the consequences of their conduct. Get them to know that they've got, if they're going to go out here and steal a car, they're going to have to pay the consequences.
When you talk about age limit,
Yes.
you're talking about the age at which a juvenile is considered an adult.
That's right,
or
18.
18 now in some cases. In Tennessee, the age limit is 18 for most
18,
crimes. Is that
yes.
correct? And are there circumstances in which does the judge have any discretion, in other words, in the juvenile system as it exists today to lower the age to a lower age?
You mean for any particular child?
That's right.
No, I think you're bound by the law as an 18-year-old. You know, marriage doesn't emancipate them. So you still got them 18 or younger. The child, what I have reference to is across the board, lower the age limit at least to 17, possibly 16. Because like the boy I said I had Wednesday that was at a state school, and then they shuttled him back to Johnson City after 2.5 months there. It's not pleasant, but I think we've got to get the message through that if you're going to go out and violate other people's rights, then they too have rights. And I tried to explain that before every case. What your rights are, appoint countless attorneys. You have these young people today knowing what their rights are, and they assert them. And this is disturbing because many of them, of course, come from homes, and it's no one there to look after them, so to speak. And so consequently, if they get in trouble, they start screaming for an attorney. And anytime I'm going to make a commitment, I'm going to make sure they have an attorney, either legal services or the defenders, public defender, or have a lot of attorneys that do pro bono work.
Tell me about how your court functions in Johnson City. Do you have, I know in Nashville, the juvenile court judge has magistrates. Do you also have a magistrate system there as well? Or do you oversee every case?
Well, we're in a jurisdiction of about 50,000, and I do have presently a referee.
Referee is what I meant to
referee,
say, excuse
yes.
me, not magistrate.
That's all right. I have a referee 1 day a week that comes in on Thursdays. Of course, everything has to be approved by the sitting judge or the one that's elected. Of course, our jurisdiction about 50,000 doesn't even compare it, of course, to Davidson County. But usually, with even decisions that are made by the referee are approved by the court. And it's then, in other words, I guess it's not only that, there's a lot of administrative work that I have, that you have, well, countless things, requisitions for improvements in different things needed in the court. We also have, I try to get as much as I can, training for my probation officers. I've come from a 3-man staff in 61 to 13 on our staff today. That includes me. I'm real proud of that. We like to think, and we do, a real good job. We have one of the lowest delinquency rates in the country.
Now, when you say delinquency rates, what do you mean by that? What's that?
Well, we take the overall picture of the number of juveniles of 18 or less that are in schools. Generally go by the school population registration. And then we take the number of cases that we've had and then divide. I won't try to do that right now, but anyway, and then figure it from that level that we then work at the child that's there. See, we handle, if you want to know, not only delinquency cases, we handle dependency and neglect, child support, non-support, paternity matters, legitimation, traffic, anything involving a juvenile under the age of 18 except divorces and adoption. And that we don't have in juvenile court. So we have a couple thousand cases a year that we actually report. Unfortunately, the state, not only this administration but prior ones, when this first came in, for instance, I have some, as I did refer back to the boy on Wednesday, had been in there countless times. Once they get a name in the computer, they don't count each new case we have. It might be computed or put in that he's there, but it's never reported as a new case, even though he might have come in, say, on something on traffic, or something of that nature, and then later gets involved in robbery or an assault on a person. But it takes another name. So consequently, not all of the cases that we hear are reported. And that's one of my beefs in the state now, is that I think you ought to report every case you hear, because we have a docket, we go down, we have a great number of cases. And so consequently, the children, as again pointed out, there's just an element in there. Some of them are, they call it recidivism, or they're repeaters, or whatever you want to say. And they do constitute a great load.
Let's see. Judge, why don't we take a little break and we'll start back here in a few minutes.
Sounds good. Sounds good to me.
Judge Underwood, tell me a little bit about some of your classmates in law school.
Well, we had a very interesting class. I think we started out with a neighborhood of 40-some, and most of them stayed with us. Of course, while we didn't all graduate at the same time, and some came in maybe right after. I came in the fall of 48, some came in December, but recently retired, or some time ago, Chester Mayhood, we called him Chet, was a judge here in Knoxville, circuit judge. And Chet and his wife Margaret were good friends of mine. As a matter of fact, Chet and Jim Mitchell, that became later, and still, as I understand, is living down in Florida, became a general in the Army in the JAG Corps. But Mayhood and Mitchell and Tom Fox, who was Assistant Attorney General for many years, in the Attorney General's Department in Nashville, the four of us studied for our law bar exam together. And if I recall correctly, all four of us passed. I think I just mentioned to you briefly a while ago that 500 took the bar exam in January 1948. And of the 500 statewide that took it, the headlines came out in the Knoxville paper. 98 men and 2 women passed, and I was fortunate enough to be one of the 2 women.
So only 100 people out of that 500 who took the bar in 48
right.
passed it.
And the most significant thing about that, and I'm going to digress from your question to say this, that having taken it in January, sometime in March, they started sending out what in 48 they called Dear John letters, you know. And you go to law school, which was up next to Church Street Methodist here in Knoxville at that time, and you go to school in the morning, and everybody would greet you, did you get your Dear John letter? And of course it got to the point where it was getting comical, because I'd go and I'd say, well, no, and they didn't, believe you, I think. But anyhow, finally we got official notice, as I recall, around the 1st of April of 1948. So we had to wait that long period of time. And then I immediately went down with several of the others, and we were admitted to the Supreme Court before they changed their minds, of course. But some of the classmates that we had, not only Chet Mitchell, Tom Fox, was Dave Pack, who later became Attorney General. All of us were real good friends. That's why I again reiterate that we were just like a family, just a bunch of children, so to speak. And we may even today that way be. We also had, I think I mentioned or did, Howard Baker was in our group, Senator Baker, still a friend, I'm sure, of all of us. Howard, I know the teachers in law school used to say to him that he was not the student his daddy had been in law school, and that sort of deflates anybody's ego, But anyway, that. And then John Duncan was in my undergraduate class, and he, of course, that was when I finished in 43, and I'm talking about John Sr., is now deceased. But in law school, in addition to those, were tried to still keep in contact. Many of them, and maybe it'll come to me as some of them.
That's John Duncan Sr. His
Senior.
son's the congressman now. Is
Congressman,
that correct?
yes,
Right,
that's
Congressman
right.
Duncan.
It's his father.
His father.
And then we had, I believe Carl Sawpaw became clerk of the court here in Knoxville. Either came right after I was there. We had the Jim Parrott on the Court of Criminal Appeals was classmate, as well as Bill Russell. I was telling her an interesting story about Bill when he ran for re-election, and I'm sorry that he was didn't move up to be a federal judge as he really wanted to be and didn't develop. But anyhow, Bill came up in our neck of the woods seeking re-election to the Court of Criminal Appeals. And he stayed a couple of nights at home with my husband and me. I went out politicking with him up in Johnson County, which is probably the most Republican part of the state then, and I think still is. But anyway, we went over, and I took a bunch of cards and went over to ask some man that was working in a ditch if he'd vote for my friend and law school classmate, Bill Russell, for re-election as the Criminal Court of Appeals. And the man looked up at me and said, well, is he a Republican? I said, sir, I'm not sure what he is, but he is an American, and I want you to vote for him. Now, I don't know whatever happened with the man, but I just thought it was very interesting that he would ask that. But I didn't really answer him directly, but in an indirect way, he was and still is a very good American.
It sounds like you were in good company in law school, Judge. I'd like to talk a little bit now about your personal life. You know, when you're not on the bench, I know you have a lot of varied interests, one of which is the University of Tennessee and its football team.
Oh, yeah.
Tell me what occupies your time when you're not being a juvenile court judge.
My principal hobby, I guess, is needlepointing. I have needlepoint countless bags. As a matter of fact, after my appointment with Governor Ellington, I made one and sent to his wife. I just had a gift. My sister dared me one time, said, you'll never finish a bag that I started. And since that time, I think I've finished about 15 or 20. And it's just a hobby. I have a number of needlepoint pictures in my home. I like things to depict things in life, like verses. Some I have done, but most are prepared on needlepoint canvas, you know, like not all the wealth in the world can't buy you a friend nor pay you for the loss of one. I have a little verse that's in the little hallway. I live in a home that is over 100 years old, and besides being an antique myself, it's full of antique furniture. But anyway, the one that I probably cherish and treasure the most is the one that says, today is first day of my life and the rest of my life, but the one, that's not the one I cherish the most. The one I cherish the most is, it says, what we are is God's gift to us. What we become is our gift to God. And I just think that that is the one that I treasure and cherish the most.
What a lovely sentiment. In the next quarter century of your life, what kinds of new projects and adventures do you anticipate?
Well, number one, I guess, you're talking a few minutes ago about interests, what to do. I'm right now debating and hoping to be able to, maybe this time next month or thereabout, no, it will be in November, go to an international congress down in Buenos Aires, Argentina. I love to travel. I did not travel outside the United States till I've been to every state. I've been real fortunate. God's blessed me so well. I'm a cancer survivor from 1977. I just in addition to that trip, in November, early November, I'm hoping and have already signed up to go back to the Passion Play in Oberammergau, Germany for the third time. I love to travel.
Tell us about that. What is that about?
Well, it's about Christ, of course, and all the things he endured, and it's spectacular, spectacular.
And where in Germany?
Oberammergau.
Okay.
And it's, in addition to studying at Edinburgh, as you pointed out, I've studied at the University of Glasgow a couple of years ago. And I always try to go down in Germany because our roots were there, my father's roots. It's to see, of course, these are all actors with Christ on the crucifixion. It's just indescribable, very touching. In this little quaint little village down in Oberammergau, it's something that I would hope that everyone would have an opportunity. We have reproductions in this country and elsewhere, but be there, and you have to be a native born of the little village. The first one I saw in '80, my maiden name was Baumgartner. That's how all these fellows would remember me, Shirley Baumgartner Underwood. But looking on the program, it was an all-day program, and when I went in and turned over and started reading, there was a Christina Baumgartner in it. So at the intermission, I went out and talked to a fellow who was an usher and told him that was my maiden name. I'd like to meet this young lady. Of course, I was on a tour group. But anyway, he did set up a meeting after that afternoon, and she worked at the Hippo Bank, and I went down to see her. Of course, he'd talked to her. What happens, she didn't have a major role in it, but she was in it, listed in the program, and went down, and the ironic thing was that she was an attractive young lady working in a bank, and my niece had just finished here at the University of Tennessee in business administration, was a bank examiner in Memphis, and could have passed for a double, really. So that I throw that in, but the little village itself, you must be a member, a native of the village to be in the play. It was then.
Interesting.
And I'm looking forward to year 2000 when I hope to be going back to that. And then I have other tours there. But if you get a chance, by all means, you ought to put it on a must. It's worthy of it.
Sounds like a wonderful trip. If you could rewrite any piece of your history, what would it be?
Well, some of it I probably wouldn't want to rewrite.
Well, that's
but
right.
Anyway, I guess my early childhood, growing up in a large family during the Depression, my father, as I said, being an attorney, my mother always at home. She was very much a homebody. I don't remember ever coming home that my mother wasn't there, even when I was in college. She was very devoted. This a wonderful lady. But I guess that when you stop and look at your life, I don't think if I could repeat that, I think the things that you have to endure during depression, all of those things, but being a lawyer, I might add, in depressions, lawyers and doctors fare pretty good. I don't remember not having 2 cars in the garage at home when I grew up. My dad had done that pretty much on his own, and he was a man of great ambition and intuition. And of course, the thing, my childhood, I think, being in a large family enabled me to be and adjust to all sorts of types of situations that I sometimes think. I ran into a fellow yesterday at the bank in Johnson City who was in my 7th grade class, and we started reminiscing about some of the students there, and he had a twin. But he said, "Do you remember Hiawatha Bacon?" And I said, "I sure do. I hadn't thought about Hiawatha in many years, so now sometimes I get off on telling these kids when I start giving them I guess they call the gavel before a decision is made. I can tell them now I went to school with Hiawatha. But anyway, I believe that respect for themselves, I tried to instill that. That's the way I was taught, strict parents. I think this, we were talking about a few minutes ago of some of the things that happened or haven't happened. This disturbs me greatly that there's not more respect. Self-respect is pretty important. Then if you have respect for yourself, you'll have respect for your parents, you'll have it for other people and other people's property. And I know I'm drifting far astream, but I think that that background I got early in life, then moved on into high school and had people that were great influence on my life, and in college. I've already mentioned several of them.
Well, speaking of people who were great influences in your life, we talked a little earlier about who some of your heroes were, and the people that you mentioned to me were political types.
That's right.
Tell me about that.
Well, I didn't mention to you, but I've always loved Abraham Lincoln. I think he was a fellow from meager means, but he managed to achieve what he did. He was just remarkable. And in those days, when you didn't have all the mass communication we have today, I just think what he accomplished and what he gave, you know, gave his life. And for the freedom, I'm very much always for the underdog too. I just, I feel real strongly about even children coming in and try to be compassionate because of, I guess, I've just been richly blessed. So Abraham Lincoln, I guess, stands high. I remember the day that President Harry Truman took office. He, of course, was someone that very little at that time, the press was not too complimentary of. Then, of course, I haven't finished, but I've started his book, Truman. Then General Eisenhower, who later became President of the United States, was probably, because of his military background, was what you might characterize as a hero. And I think what he did, as a matter of fact, in '52, I was state manager, co-manager of the Eisenhower-Nixon Citizens Forum, not a Republican or a Democrat, but citizens. And had an opportunity to be involved in all the festivities of both of his inauguration in Washington, of which I have incidentally attended 5 inaugurations in my lifetime.
That's right. Well, Judge, you have had a wide and varied career and lots of experiences, and I guess our audience for this video will include Bar Association folks, because we hope to show those. Tell us about your affiliations with various bar associations.
Well, as much time as I can spare, I try to attend as many of the functions as I can. My husband, I mentioned earlier, was a bad diabetic. There was a period of time he was real sick, in and out of the hospital. So I tried to attend the bar associations early on, and even up attended here in June. I guess I've been more and solidly entrenched in the National Council of Juvenile and Family Court Judges stationed at Reno. And I have, since being a juvenile court judge, attended all but 2 of their meetings, and they've been all over the country. We had some elsewhere, like in Hawaii and other places. I've tried to maintain a real close relationship with the local bar. And then state bar, I hope that I can from here on out. I was quite disappointed that we didn't have any more members present in June than we did. I think it was just 3 or 4 that were there that I had been in law school with. but that was the first I'd attended a couple of years because I'd missed a lot with his illness. And then I had a knee replacement 2 years ago, and of course I was out during the years I had cancer. But other than that, I think that I've participated, I've tried, and I find now, being a senior member more than 50 years, don't have to pay my dues. So I see no reason not to get active anytime you get into something that kind.
Well, don't worry, I'll put you to work doing something here pretty soon.
Well, we'll try. We'll do our best. But I guess that, and then we've got several other organizations, like I said, going to post-conference conventions like the International Convention. I like to keep abreast of what's going on in my particular part of law, because law today is, you know, I don't have to tell you, young attorneys quite specialized. It's like medicine, and it's good and it's bad. It really is. Really, to be special in any particular field, I guess is good.
Judge, we're going to sort of wrap this up, and I wanted to say something special to you. One of my favorite poets is W.H. Auden, and he wrote in a poem called I Am Not a Camera. Instructive it may be to peer through lenses. Each time we do, though, we should apologize to the remote or the small for intruding upon their quiddities. As a judge, you are neither remote nor small, but I hope you don't think this is too much of an intrusion into your life. We have appreciated you being here, and we're very grateful to you. Thank you.
Well, I thank you most kindly.